Well done last week on your responses to some excellent speeches. Looking first of all at the Barack Obama one, we could talk about his ethos or his credibility. And one of the things that's instructive is to think about the way it would be so easy just to sort of milk the adoring audience, but he doesn't. He actually reaches out to the Republicans who didn't vote for him. How very Donald Trump-like. He has a very powerful sense of history, and there are overt references to Lincoln, government by the people, for the people, and of the people. And also, of course, there's an unspoken reference point to the kind of tidal wave change in history that Martin Luther King was looking ahead to. His capacity as a president to acknowledge that wider sweep of history is very important, but he brings in also his own personal touch, which includes his children as well. And some of you mentioned the puppy that their children would now have. Here we have two great schemers shooting for the moon. And once again, I think it's worth just touching upon how JFK establishes ethos. Now, you as a student addressing other people, perhaps around the country in an online conference, won't be able to assert your authority because you're a president, but you might be able to think about some of the things that Kennedy does, which doesn't depend upon him being a president. So we can note the research he's done about Rice University, the fact that with the science, he understands not just the facts and figures, and logos is important, but also the exponential capacity of science to accelerate, to meet challenges that we don't know how to solve at the moment. Because he's president, there's another area of credibility to do with, well, what does America stand for? What will be America's ethos appeal? And there's two really good points that he makes. One is that America's always responded well to times of crisis. They've become nation-building moments. And another is the idea of, well, what kind of competition or rivalry confers better outcomes for the rest of the world? And he wants a peaceful flag placed on the moon as opposed to what the Soviet Union might put there. There's something really credible about that American desire to offer a kind of a moral leadership. I would suggest that we could transfer that to what we wish for from Australia. In the end, we want the mission of our country to be a worthy mission. I love the proposition of this speech. It is such a tricky one to convey that we're doing this challenge precisely because it is difficult, because we don't know how to do it yet. And yet for him to sort of win our support that we want to launch for the moon justifies why it's such a memorable speech. This is a wonderful speech, and so many people engaged with this, and it was a suitable culminating speech of the week. He acknowledges the pain of the people in the audience, and I think that's something we can take away from this. If you've got people who are suffering because there is a problem, listen to that. It is a problem, and it has to be named, and it cannot be downgraded. These are withering flames that people who've suffered racism have experienced. That's because they're flames which crush growth. His use of authority was probably an area where a little bit of research could have been done. It was the Declaration of Independence when the check was signed. There was another commitment to that check by Lincoln 100 years previously, almost exactly when he signed the Proclamation of Independence for all slaves halfway through the American Civil War. And by the way, this speech is being delivered by the Lincoln Monument. So he's referring to the most powerful moral authorities in American history. And the use of authority is something that you can fully develop by seeing where those either overt quotations or subtle allusions are working. There's a trick of the trade here that you might want to think about. He takes an abstract concept, we did concepts with the first task, and he always transfers them into a concrete, touchable thing like the path of racial justice. But then what he does so well is he adds an adjective that helps to cement that visual image in our memory. So it's a sunlit path of racial justice. And now I can really remember that. Now, in terms of creating a strong conclusion, there's a kind of a wave-like effect that's called anaphora. Now is the time, now is the time, or let freedom ring, a sequence of places where freedom is going to ring out. And no one picked up the reference to the Liberty Bell. So some of you guys who went to America on exchange have probably seen this thing, but this was the bell that rang out when the Declaration of Independence was signed. So over to you. What can we learn from this? It's not just a question of analysing it. And I think we've got to speak the truth about the extent and the nature of the problem. Already some of your reflections on COVID-19 are doing that. I don't think we'll get the call to action or the vision unless you have got that vision for what change can look like. Easy to complain, how are we going to fix it? We can sometimes get a little bit lost in just kind of studying in, decorating a speech with rhetorical questions or lists of three, but there has to be an underlying strategy. And I think all of these three speeches have it. They propose something that's difficult to do, they acknowledge the scale of the problem, and in that context, they give a solution. When you've got that, and it's our typical thing of turning a proposition or a perspective into three subsets, then you're ready to sort of start putting in some of your effects. In terms of pace, posture, gesture, volume, all of them are will be in the task sheet. I don't mind looking at TED Talks. I think this is a sort of a version of what you're being asked to do. And here's one that I absolutely love, and he actually refers to Barack Obama, Barry Schwartz. I think he's a psychologist, but he talks about the need for virtue in order to rebuild society.